Today, I'm delighted that Shirley Palmer is taking some time out to come along and talk to us all and talk with us all. Shirley is recognised for her strategic and innovative leadership from Antrim to London to Los Angeles. Shirley returned to Northern Ireland before the pandemic. Anybody still remember the pandemic? It's 4 years ago now. 4 years ago it all started nearly. And basically now commits the time to shaping the future of leadership through innovative, inclusive and sustainable business practices as well. Shirley also runs the Northern Ireland Supper Club, which is where a group of like-minded individuals, so people who are looking to make a difference, get together, share, support each other. So in a lot of ways, it's a little bit like Innovate Island, but with better food and drink. So maybe that's something there for us to learn from. Okay, so we know that we're living in an era of constant change. So I'm delighted that Shirley is going to share her views, her insights on how leadership is and needs to adapt to support that constant change. For those of you familiar with the format, Shirley will speak for 20, 30 minutes, something around that, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion, Q&A. I will keep an eye on the chat. Please do fire questions in as we go, but we'll Shirley, you can pick them up if you like, or we can pick them up whenever you've stopped, whenever you sort of finished your main content, if you like. So Shirley, over to you.
Great. So I'm going to apologize because it's my technical inadequacies because I don't normally present on Teams. I usually do it on Zoom. So listen, everybody, lovely to see you here today. Thank you for taking your time out, as Charlie said, and delighted to run this. This is really a quick masterclass that I've done previously for Ulster University. So I'll give you a little snapshot of how I look at the future of leadership and where we're really changing to. So we may not cover every single slide, but we'll get a quick whistle-stop tour over the next 20-30 minutes. And then we'll just open the floor for questions. As Charlie said, please feel free to put your questions in the chat right now, and we'll address those at the end. I think that's probably the quickest and the simplest way to do this. Okay. So overview, we're going to talk about change. We're going to talk about self-leadership. We're going to talk about conscious leadership. Community involvement, inclusivity and diversity, of course, sustainability and ethics, and of course, how do we look at that future of leadership to embrace it in our respective businesses and our lives, you know, because it's all part of the journey. Charlie's given a quick chit chat on me. I am originally from the Glens of Antrim, farmer's daughter, spent a long time, maybe too long, in private equity, and then had the joy of living in California for a few years. Absolutely love the journey so far, and it's great to be back home in our lovely island. So looking at that overall evolving landscape around leadership and how do we do that, what we're seeing is the shift from the old hierarchical models into something that's much more sustainable and more inclusive. So we're seeing how teams are shifting, we're seeing how people are shifting, we're seeing how the business models are shifting and what it is that we need to change in there. So instead of that constant old school mythology of thinking about the profits and the bottom line, more businesses are now recognizing the importance of the well-being of their staff and also community. So you'll hear me often talk about legacy, that legacy piece. What are we doing in our business and our lives to create that legacy piece that is sustainable beyond the time that we're actually here, and how that can make a difference. Good example of this is Unilever, where they really shifted in their environmental changes and also their social sustainability changes, and recognizing what really needed to be done to support. And the last section on this, really, where we're looking at that intersection between the business and the entrepreneur and the third sector as such. So again, recognizing social purpose, recognizing sustainable practices, making those a priority, and really understanding how we could do that differently. If you look, for any of those that you know, Young Enterprise NI, Carol Fitzsimmons has done an amazing job. Really, they're looking at that business, the entrepreneurship, and the third sector piece, and how we're supporting our younger people that are looking at starting a business and how that's presented itself in a very simplistic mannerism. Keeping in flow with those three key areas is staying ahead with the global trends, recognizing what we're doing with change. So if we look at the moment, the biggest thing that everybody's dealing with is AI, the fear that it's created, instead of recognizing it's a tool to utilize. Why are we not using it? Can this make our lives better, more supportive? And, you know, could we all be working less hours in a more innovative way because utilizing AI? Who's to know? I see absolutely no reason why not. Again, when you're thinking about that change, the importance of that continuous learning. So thinking about how you're currently learning and supporting your teams through that process too. Navigating through change, again, we've just talked about it. Charlie's just mentioned COVID and that importance around being agile, recognizing where there's an opportunity to pivot. So if we look at COVID, using that as an example, we had many restaurants that switched into not being able to serve and support people by having a lovely night out, to switching it into like an online pickup, so you could order your food and go through that process. Again, with that process of looking at pivoting, what do you need to pivot to? How do you shift and move? Some of the biggest businesses that are out there started off as one thing and then completely shifted into something else when they realized, actually, here's another way to do this. Here's a better way to do this. Why are we not taking this into consideration? And actually, let's just shift through it. So for any of you that are entrepreneurs and starting out in a new business, or getting to a stage where it's like, you know, maybe it's time to change, there's a lovely young man I'm connected with on LinkedIn, Chris Ingram, who had Rejuvenate Water, and, you know, he's finally decided it's time to hang up his boots. And it explained, you know, the struggle that he's gone through over the last number of years with building that brand, building that business, and recognizing, do you know what? It's time to let that go, and it's time to switch over and move into something else and recognize what that next one is. Resilience, I think it's fair to say that the whole island of islands, the UK and Europe, I would say, probably has a much stronger degree of resilience than what maybe is in America. And having lived there for a few years and worked there, I've seen that difference in cultures and what that looks like. So using resilience as part of that process when you're looking at pivoting, and how again to ensure that you're seizing those new opportunities that are coming to you and are available, while still ensuring you've always got contingencies in place. As I touched on previously, that importance around creating that culture around learning. So ask yourself maybe some of those questions. You know, what's in your workplace right now? What's in your environment right now? How are you developing that added innovation, that added learning process? What does that look like for your teams? How are you supporting them? How are you investing in training and creating new ideas? For any of you that don't know the story behind Gmail, for example, I guess I would say probably most people in the world have got a Gmail account somewhere, even if they're just using it for their shopping or something of that ilk. But Gmail came about because Google decided that people would be allocated a couple of hours every week to go and sit in a different department to learn something else that was happening in those teams and what that looked like. And through that process, every now and again, they would get those opportunities to sit down and pitch those ideas. And therefore, that's where it came from. There's that opportunity to maintain a competitive edge if you're allowing your teams to actually come up with new ideas, but also about them learning about themselves and where they're shifting and where they're moving to. Alan Watts, a man, I would say, way beyond his time, said it really well. You know, the only way to make sense out of change is plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. it's a constant in every single day. We've got to adapt with it. That's where your mindset mastery comes in, and recognizing, okay, here's the challenge, here's the hurdle, or here's the positive, or here's the new opportunity. How do we move with it and head forwards? So I'm a big believer that you can't be a successful leader unless you look at leading yourself first. And in leading yourself first, is this image reflects that importance of that intergenerational process and tools, being able to move up the ladder and move down the ladder, learning from different people in your team, not just your team, your wider family, but also the wider community and what that might look like. So really what you want to be doing here is, number one, identifying what's your core strength, what's so unique about you, what's different about you, how are you using that, can you use that more, can you use that better? That process of reflection to really help you recognize, actually, do you know what am I really good at and what am I not good at? So there's pros and cons, almost doing your own little SWOT analysis on yourself. Using that self-assessment really as a tool to help you lead better, and also recognize how are you inspiring people, and what does that look like? You know, I think if I think about my childhood and going to grammar school, you know, my headmaster was the one with the big stick, and you know, we got the cane. It was being led by fear. Today is no longer about being led by fear. It's being led by the mind, by the heart, by bringing people in, by collaboration, by looking at how we can excel and how we can support each other in a very different way. So, as I said, that self-awareness, bringing that self-awareness in, recognizing where you can seek out those challenges, recognizing when you get that feedback, again, acknowledging whether the feedback is positive or negative, recognizing that it's okay to take that on board and understand it for what it is, but to be able to learn from that and move forward with it. So that commitment to lifelong learning, because I don't think it doesn't matter what age you are, there's always still something to learn from and others to learn from as well. So conscious leadership, again, quick, we could spend all day on this one, really, to be honest. If you think it in simple terms about recognizing the human experience, recognizing how we deal with our emotions, recognizing how we're not just supporting within the business model, but also the wider family and then the community that goes beyond that. So ethical decision making, bringing empathy in, understanding what it is to meet your team's needs. Does the team actually communicate? What does that communication look like? How often are you getting together as a team and understanding what some of those issues are, what some of those problems are? I'm reminded of, as we said earlier, I spent a number of years in private equity, and the first private equity house I worked in was IK Invest, as they're now known, which is a Scandinavian outfit. I was the first non-Scandinavian to actually join the team. It was learning a completely different culture, what they did, the mannerism that they did things. But one of the things that we did do was every single day we got together for lunch. It was short, it was 40 minutes, but we got together around the table, we sat down, we chat about life, we chat about getting to know each other. There won't be moments when maybe there was a conversation around business, but the emphasis was, how can we foster a more collaborative approach about what we were doing, recognizing what we're doing around the business models. Are those ethical? Are we creating a more innovative work environment, and what does that look like? So you know, there's lots of different ways to be able to position that and look at it. There's a US chap, I'm trying to remember what his name is, but he basically decided that every single member of his staff would get paid the equivalent of something around, say, $100,000, irrespective of what it was, and he said he was paying himself the same. And you know, it's where can we level that playing field that we often talk about and strip back that pyramid idea of how we grow the business and how it's positioned to ensure that we're getting other people involved in the process. The second section here really talking about society and environment. We see this all the time. I'm not going to go into this in any depth, but really what is your footprint? What's that footprint looking at like from an ecological perspective or a societal perspective? So again, with your business, what are you doing with your business? Where are you connecting it? Are you aligned with the charity? Are you aligned with people in the social community? How can you improve upon that? What does that look like right now? Has anybody thought about it? If not, why don't you get a team together and sit down and start thinking about what could we do in our local community that would make a difference? How could we present something else that would be supportive to the environment? Great examples of this is Patagonia as a brand and what they did in their environmental and sustainability commitments and how they shifted and changed that business model. And then the last one here is really around that profitability piece. You know, most people are in business because from their viewpoint, it's about the bottom line and the profits. When you're thinking about conscious leadership, you're really thinking about, it's not just about the profits, it's about the wider aspect of the world. What are we doing? How can we improve it? What does that look like? And it's that alignment in place that's going to be so much more supportive. So another great example of that would be the likes of Lego and what Lego did and how they shifted around better packaging. They did the educational piece. So again, it was reframing what was a toy. And actually, even in today's society, Lego is being used by some leadership experts actually to help train people and help them understand a little bit more about that added engagement and what that added engagement looks like. Simon Sinek said leadership's not about being in charge, but it's really about taking care of those in your charge. And again, I just say, you know, life's a journey. So I think it's important for us to remember, whilst we're talking about business here, those in our charge are our families and our community as well, and the importance of looking at that. To a degree, we've covered aspects of this, but really thinking about that local community, what that collaboration is, how you can improve it and look at it differently. The D&I, how can we look at that better, and how do we look at culture of belonging from a viewpoint of what we're doing? You know, if we look at the whole island of Ireland, people are more in tune with, we belong to this island, the recognition of what that is. There's not the same divide as what there maybe was 20, 40 years ago, and it's important that we're bringing that diversity of different voices to the table. You know, if we think about one of the things I think about is, if any of you are connected to people in construction, or if you think of that as an aspect, you know, one of our things that we've lost is our aspects of our rural communities and our villages. So, you know, if some of our huge construction firms were to consider an opportunity of getting together, looking at renewing some of our villages, what could they bring in, creating hubs, community hubs, entrepreneurial hubs. I mean, there's huge opportunities there. Definitely be doing, and happy to engage with anybody in a conversation on that one as well. Sustainability, again, to be fair, we've touched on that, but really, what else would I add in here? I think the key thing about we're all on this earth together. We're all facing similar challenges. We've all got to think about how can we shift our business model to make sure that it is more eco-friendly, it is more sustainable. If you've got products as opposed to service, again, how are you making them renewables? Those shifts in how society's looking at different aspects around what it is that you're bringing to the table. It's different. There's a lot of argument that, you know, if we look at Tesla's shift to electric vehicles and how that's completely shifted the whole industry, there's still a huge argument around, is that actually still being supportive overall to the planet? because of, you know, the recycling aspect and how does that position itself. So there's still lots of room in there to be discussing those things and how they could be looked at. There's still more aspects to brought into play around ethical practices. For anybody that maybe watched Dragon's Den last night, one of the entrepreneurs on there was made not mind, and what they're doing, they were making diamonds, and actually it probably spoke to every single one of the Dragon's Den, simply from a viewpoint that they were not mining the stones, they were making the stones, and what that looked like. And actually they had a very clever business model, and they only had one person in mind that they wanted to come along and join their team, and they managed to do that for $250,000 and 3%, which was pretty impressive in my mind. And then looking at those global challenges like climate change. So again, you know, if we look at what Apple has done with their product, I think there's a lot of people where you're not an Apple fan, you might at least have an iPhone from the rest of the tech perspective, but their commitment really to carbon neutrality and what that looks like and how that's positioned. So again, you know, really understanding a little bit more around that sustainability and ethics and what it is that you're doing, so that we're tapping into that global conscious that we're all aware of, but we're maybe not doing enough about, even individually. And really the last section here. So thinking about that future of leadership and really getting a sense and feel of what that's like. So really what we're looking at here is being able to navigate as a leader between the difference between those aspirational goals, but at the same time making sure that it's a practical process in what it is that you're doing. I'm a big believer in big visions, huge visions, and then really look at how do you reverse engineer that so that you're making sure that you're going along step by step along the way, not suddenly feeling, oh my God, we can't do this, it's not possible, it's not achievable. You know, again, I take my hat off to you guys. Creating what you've did over COVID is a perfect opportunity to really bring that resonance to the table, that more people need to be talking and more people need to be active in like-minded groups like this, to have these discussions, to actually make a difference in what we're doing. I'm going to use Bezos as an example here. You know, if you think about what he did in his mind, his concept and his idea of what he wanted to create, the world's largest shop to a degree, and really he has done that. Could he still be doing a lot more for conscious leadership? Absolutely, 100%. But I think the more of us that actually engage and look at other ways to actually provoke added thought around this can make a huge difference. Bringing in that emotional intelligence piece, I think, is really, really important, because we are all human beings. It is part of our experience that we've got to deal with. We've got to create meaningful ways to problem solve, not just, okay, this is a tick in the box to solve the problem. Creating that culture that is about being open-minded, bringing empathy to the table as well as the creativity, and recognizing more around the human needs in our teams as well as the technical needs. So when we start to think about AI and, you know, maybe your team's panicking about, oh, does this mean I'm not going to have a job anymore because you're going to get rid of me because you're going to have a robot to do it instead? The answer is no, because we're still going to need humans, but it's, you know, again, helping them recognize what their role is going to present in that. And the last piece here I would simply say is leading with your mind and your heart. Whilst we all want to have good bottom lines, we all want to have profit, it's really important to think about the people that we are supporting, the people that we're also selling to. Important to be working with businesses and people that we like, because again, that's building that strategy. Excuse me, that's building that strategy around engaging with people who do want to make a difference and do want to create a different way of solving the problem rather than just a tick box process. I think Satya, who leads Microsoft, is doing a really incredible job right now. And that's a perfect illustration of where that balance is being brought in with the mind and the heart, because I think a lot of people kind of wrote Microsoft off and said, yeah, but they're only going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, taking into consideration where Apple was and what Apple was doing, and how that positioned itself. This is my own opinion and my own quote, if I'm being really honest. I do think that the future of leadership lies in our ability to unite business success with the welfare, excuse me, of humanity and the planet. It's about creating a legacy that values prosperity, compassion, sustainability, and equal measure, ensuring that our actions today nurture the world for generations to come. We have a short window here. I think it's really important that we think a little bit more about our children, our grandchildren. Beyond that, what is this place going to look like, and what can we do to make sure that it's still here? One of my favorite places in the world, for those of you that have been there many times, the North Coast, just all along the beach, down in from Mussendom Temple the whole way through to McGilligan Point and right over to Donegal. We live in a beautiful island. We need to spend more time showcasing our island as well. I tend to use this for a moment of reflection, and I'm ready for questions, and that's just to connect with me so I can jump out. There we go.
Thank you. That was fantastic, Shirley. Thank you so much for that. And the timing of it is excellent, because the last few weeks we've been having a lot of conversations about how do we actually do more than kind of moan about things need to be different. I know I'm paraphrasing hugely, and Frank Hannigan, who's often on these, who's not on today, I mean, he said it, he put it really well, that we, and it's true again today, looking at the demographic, on the call, we are the generation that when we were young, we moaned about because things needed to change and they sat on their asses and did nothing. We are now in danger of being the ones sitting on our asses and doing nothing, so we need to make changes. We know that. So this has come at a perfect time. There are a number of questions in the chat, but I'm going to leap in first, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the things that you said that we need to do in order to start all of this process is to have a long, hard look at ourselves, basically, to do a little bit of self-reflection. And is there an element here on the island of Ireland, in the UK, or whatever, where we struggle with that because of effectively false modesty? If we look on the people on this call and the things they have achieved, but you get someone to start talking about it and go, oh yeah, sure, it was just so and so, but there is amazing things being done, but we're really bad at saying, yeah, I'm actually quite good at this. We're really good at, I'm not very good at this. So what is there anything we can do about that in like a 30-second technique?
Stop doubting yourself, stop questioning yourself, and actually just start sharing. It takes 67 days to make or break a habit. It takes a millisecond to choose to do something about it. And the more that you get into a habit of doing it and just acknowledging it, the easier it will become. It's a simple mindset shift. It's a simple mindset shift. That's all it is. I could say from a perspective of, one of the things that they tend to say most people have the greatest fear of is actually public speaking and what that looks like. And they're more frightened of that than what they are of death. Again, I would say we're all of a generation where we're all dealing with losing loved ones, and I've just lost 2 this week, one after the other. It's really not, it's the fear of being judged is the problem. When you can let go of, I don't give a flying tootsies about what someone else thinks about what it is, you can only speak from your own experience. When you let that go, it's really easy. So it's practice. It's like everything. It's practice. Having the confidence to just say, do you know what? Yeah, I'm just going to get on with it. Yeah. I see it all the time. So I've been back 4 years and I've constantly just seen this I'm not good enough, I can't do that, I'm not, and now I'm just like, okay, how about we just change it? Let's try this today. Let's see what it goes like.
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you. Thanks for that. I'm going to work down the chat questions first, and then if people kind of want to put hands up when we get to the bottom of that. So Brian asking, how do you think AI is going to impact leadership tasks outside of data and decisions in the short to medium term?
In a crazy kind of way, I think it will actually encourage us to really think a bit more about our own selves. I think it will encourage us to really think about self-reflection, and it'll make us more aware of what our own emotions are. Because you've got to remember, at the end of the day, when you think about AI, or if you use AI as any form of tool, Brian, it has no emotions. So it's just going to give you a flat response of whatever that is. So I think what it will help us to understand better is our own self-reflection. It'll help us understand ourselves better. In theory, it should be it should be an added tool to support us being much better leaders in what we're doing, because we'll pay more attention to the team rather than the focus that always ends up being on processes. Because when you've got good communication with your team, you're already in a position where you're going to get a win-win. When you've got the right team doing what you're doing in your business, again, you've got the engagement, and you've got that ability for them to be able to come to you and have a conversation quickly and easily.
Okay, no, that helps definitely. Just a different viewpoint. Like I wouldn't say I'm scared of AI, but I'm just kind of conscious, of where it don't seem to be very good. If you look globally at learning from our mistakes and the mistakes we've made, I think with social media and stuff, just totally underestimated the impact it'll have. So AI and now being able to do mathematical equations over the last couple of months, it is fairly dramatic, the power of it. So I just think hopefully we learn from the social media mistake, but I don't think so. We don't seem to be learning from previous mistakes if you look globally at the moment. So yeah, that's a concern, and you are right. It's getting the right people in the right positions and the right mindset and attitude. So, and as Shirley said, it's probably more about us trying to influence the others that are coming rather than thinking that we can change it all ourselves at this stage.
I mean, there's no question that there's lots of bits in there that are quite scary. And, I seen one the other day when I realized that, when you're looking at your social media feed and different things are promoting different things, but when you get to realize that actually today technology could take a copy of you, take a copy of your voice, do X, Y, and Z and A, B, and C with it, and that aspect, no question in my mind, is relatively scary. The key will have to be in some mannerism where they can bring in some rigorous compliance or something in order to ensure that things like that don't happen. Where, when you look at, again, when we look at on the news over the last week or whatever, and seen the number of people that have been scammed in lots of ways, especially the older generation, again, a lot of that is probably AI generated in some mannerism to start with, and trying to figure out who, what, where, when, and what that looks like. But I think the most important thing to remember is we've ended up creating this. So if we've ended up creating this, we know we need to manage it better. Yeah, and the best possible way.
I'd be all for it. I'm a technologist, future, whatever, and I think technology is fantastic, but I just feel that we probably haven't learned from the past, and that's the bit that scares me. It's like, okay, and again, I don't want to get into this conversation, but it's like if you look at social media and you look at elements like Twitter or whatever, it's X now, I'd all be for free speech, but that's just a cesspit, of opinions that can only that only harm people's opinions, that sort of way. So if that's how social media is now being leveraged by people with bad intentions, what does AI, what does it mean for AI when rather than just having a keyboard, they've got something that can possibly do something as a co-pilot or whatever? So it's that general piece, that we need to keep involved. And I mean, from a day-to-day perspective, I think even day-to-day tasks, even now, there's huge value in just looking at tools that can simplify some of your repetitive tasks and things like so. Yeah. So I think there's areas you can use now, but as part of the wider thing, I just think we need to be paying more attention when we're talking about sustain, and we need to be linking. Obviously, this AI piece has a huge risk, and that needs to become forefront. And tech can't lead it, because then it's going to be profit driven, and regulation is just going to be too slow. So government, so who's going to influence this? And that's a huge.
Let's not hopefully.
No, let's move on. Hopefully
the people in this room will help influence that. Alan, I can see you've got your hands up. Alan.
Yeah, Alan, I'm going to come back to you in a second if that's all right, because there's a few people have put a lot of questions in. I'm not going to read them out. Karen, Dara, Connor, and John, and then Alan in that order. I'm actually going to put Catherine in before Dara, because you had a comment or a question about the multi-generational workforce, which would seem to sort of follow on from an earlier bit, Catherine, and then we'll go to Dara, if that's okay.
Yeah, the challenges of as we live longer and work longer, there will be up to 4 generations in any given organization, workplace, or work configuration, which brings a unique set of challenges, I think, probably to this generation and the next one. What would be your thoughts on how to best prepare for that?
Be open-minded. Recognize, as I said earlier, you can learn up the ladder and you can learn down the ladder. I think there is a propensity that the older generation can get a little bit egotistical and go, well, I'm your elder, I know better, I've been on this earth longer, blah, 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 and not fully recognize, the teenagers or 20-somethings that's done a degree in a completely different unknown topic or subject and what else they can bring to the table. The important thing is to acknowledge experience, expertise, wisdom all come with age, but we've got to look at innovation, looking at things differently. So there's an immense opportunity to actually make sure that you've got that engagement across the board through those various different generations. And I think more than ever, we can work that to humanity's benefit. No question in my mind.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's certainly an element there when we can educate the school leavers as much as we like about innovation, but if the workforce they're going into doesn't know to accept the challenge, then they're wasting the time. So that, there's people, I hate to keep saying this, but our generation need a lot of education to accept that.
Yeah, there's another important statistic in there, if any of you are not aware of it, but any child at the moment that's kind of 10 or 11 in primary school and about to shift and move is going to end up going into a job that probably doesn't exist yet. So more than ever, the most important tools that we're actually ensuring that teach them is those soft skills. And those soft skills are really, really of the utmost importance, because if they can't communicate, if they can't understand, if they don't know what they really want to be doing, etc., that's not going to support them in any view at all. So, we've kind of done ourselves an injustice, or our government did ourselves injustice, if we look at the UK and we look at Ireland, in the sense of, everybody needs to have a university degree. Everybody doesn't need a university degree. Everybody needs to be following their heart and their soul and deciding, this is what I like, this is what I want to do, this is what brings me joy, this is where I get fun out of. And, that whole aspect of bringing apprenticeships back makes a world of difference. But we need people that are savvy to be able to move us forward. We don't just need a bunch of people that are geniuses. That's not going to help. Yeah, we need the common sense piece, and that's often forgot.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Dara, you had a good few comments there. If you want to pick something out from there to...
Yeah, sure. Shirley, well, I tell you, it's probably easier. That was fantastic. I know it was a great refresher, actually, as it happens. Both myself and Justin previously did a course with Common Purpose Ireland, which actually, or Common Purpose globally, which actually teaches every aspect of what you just spoke about, which was fantastic, actually, to get a refresher in terms of that. Was a few years ago since I did it. My question is probably more around that tension around companies often say their core values are their employees, communication, transparency, yada, yada, yada. However, if you'll excuse the language, when the shit hits the fan, they get dropped, and suddenly it's all about the bottom line. And actually, and a few years ago, when you know, the slowdown in big tech is the biggest example that I can think of. It was all ping pong tables and bean bags until there wasn't 20% growth anymore. You know, and then suddenly, actually, no, it was ones and zeros. So it's about, I suppose, managing that tension. You know.
And what's the question? How do we manage
I suppose
tension?
if you're like, I mean, if you're a leader in that scenario, and then suddenly from the board down goes, no, cut 20% of the workforce or 20% of your team, just off the bat, like, and you go, well, that's completely contrary to the values that we've been talking about for the last 5 years, you know. And how you push back against that.
I would say the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sit down and you're going to do your pros and cons and look at, you know, how did we shift so dramatically from one place to the other place, and what does that look like? Understanding what else has happened from the business perspective. Has it been competition for the business itself? Has it been outside forces? Is it climate change as an example as part of it? So number one, it's about understanding the bigger picture of what's actually happened, first and foremost, to for the business leaders to be making the decision, this is what we've got to do. And then number two, it's actually shifting it around and going, well, actually, can we do this differently? And going back to them and saying, here's what we can do. So let me give you an example. Partially in the way into COVID, I was working with a young team in Oman, tech business, got some investment, building out the team. And, you know, we've kind of gone from three owners till about a dozen or thereabouts, and then looking at the expansion, etc., and so on. So where we're going, and deep dives, what analysis, everything, really looking at a solid foundation across the board about what that business was doing. About a month after COVID, it was like, right, Shirley, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to lose our big customers. A lot of the big customers were oil and gas. And in that vein, that was all going a bit crazy. But they were not looking at doing any new business, and they were going into panic mode. Well, what do we do? How do we move from here? My ethos was really straightforward and simple. This is a position in a situation that no one really knows what's going to happen globally. I know they want to say it's 4 weeks or whatever, but my gut feeling was it was going to be at least months, not necessarily years. So keep your staff for as long as possible. If you have to put them on 50% pay, you put them on 50% pay, because that's maybe all the business can afford. But you do that because you know you've got, you should have a loyal team. So if you brought the right people on board at the right times, you'll have a good loyal team. And then subsequent to that, you're not in a position at a later point in time where you're having to deal with having to go and find new people and recruit. So one is about being a human being conscious, making sure those people have food on the table, a roof over their head, etc., and the importance of what that looks like. And two, the other aspect is you've got to think in the wider dynamic around what the business is going to do going forward. Trying to recruit another team subsequently has been mayhem. If we look at the hospitality sector as an example, people are struggling hand and fist throughout the whole of the island trying to get people. Part of that reason is because we don't have all the people that we maybe would have had previously from Eastern Europe, for example, as part of that process. So I think it's no hasty decisions. It's really sit down and try and understand the why, and then going back to the board or whoever and say, sorry, was our core values just a tick box? Did this not really mean anything? And really, in the scheme of things going forward, I don't think any business is going to have a choice. It's got to really think about conscious leadership as a primary tool to be using in their business on a much more regular basis. It's not a tick box process. It's like, you know, if we think about what do they call it? Corporate corporate social responsibility. You know, when CSR first came out, and it was a tick box process. Every business that I can probably think of was just going, yeah, what do we need to do? Can we make sure it's done? Can we make sure it's on our website and it's a tick the box and that's it? Didn't take it seriously.
It was a marketing tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed.
Thank you, Shirley. And just apologies, I have to jump off because I have to get ready for another call. So
that's okay. Nice to
meet
you, Darren.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm conscious that we've 10 minutes. We're still 3 people in the queue here. So Connor and John, then Alan, who must have a really tired arm by now because his hand's been up for 15-20 minutes.
It was just a comment on the discussion around legacy, and you know, the despondency that is out there. And just one example, I'm doing a bit of work with the HSE, and you talk about despondency. You know, you come into work and you hear these headlines that are trundled out every morning, and as Fintan O'Toole calls it, like there's this, you know, learned helplessness that has crept into everything, and it pervades the whole culture of the organization. A kind of a poor old us kind of phenomenon then begins to take hold. But yes, there are fantastic things being done every day in the HSE. And it's our job to remind people that they're capable of doing fantastic things, and to actually continue to search for those sources of inspiration within what teams are doing, so that it puts the wind in the sails of the things that the new things that the big hairy scary things that we need to go after and solve. So I think we just need to over-index on what actually gets us excited and what inspires us, and then get that kind of light in people's eyes as well in our teams. I think that's how we do it, because you could just fall into that trap very easily, and lick our wounds and say poor old us all the time. So, but really good discussion, guys, and thank you, Shirley. Really good presentation.
Pleasure, Connor.
John?
Yeah, actually, along the same lines, excellent presentation, Shirley. Thank you very much for sharing it. But the point I was going to ask you is that profitability is very easy to measure. Sorry, profitability is measurable, right? There's lots of actually KPIs out there that will actually allow us to do it. What would you class as meaningful metrics around the measuring social responsibility, or the impact that that's going to have?
I think first and foremost, you would look at it from a team's perspective. So understanding, or your staff perspective, you know, and I don't think that would be a difficult one to do, you know, even once a quarter, just getting members of staff to fill in a quick survey. They could even fill it in anonymously, and having, you know, 10 quick core questions of what those are. Those questions might shift over the course of the year, depending on what the business is doing and what that's actually looking like. But I think you know, again, it goes back to that piece around, we've got lots of people doing work out there that's doing a 9 to 5, they're ticking a box, they're getting a check at the end of the month or a paycheck at the end of the month, but they're really not enjoying what they're doing. And typically people that come to me that say, you know what, I'm shifting career, I can't decide, I'm not sure what I'm doing. It has to go back to our time on earth is so freaking short in the first place. Why are you not doing something you love? What is that? What does that look like? Because when you're doing something that you're passionate about and you really have joy in and you're enjoying, you're going to embrace it so much more. You'll have so much more fun with it. That improves how you present yourself. Again, that exchange of energy goes out to the rest of the team. You know, therein lies the signs of a good leader. So I think doing it initially from that viewpoint, and then again, just looking at it, you know, I also do some charity work and support some charities with helping them look at ways in their fundraising, etc. So again, you know, just looking at what else is happening in the local community and local environment, how can they be engaged more, and what does that look like, you know, and lending to what Catherine said earlier, we've got a lot of people that are of a much older age that are actually not working anymore, but have phenomenal skill sets to be able to support in lots of different ways. You know, my dad's going to be 85 in March. He's a farmer. He went out to a day job. I consider him the entrepreneur, because most people said to him, yeah, you'll go out to be a farmer, you'll lose your, or you'll go out to a day job, you'll lose your farm, you'll never do that, you'll never whatever. But to me, he was the one that was innovative in recognizing, can't feed 5 children and a wife on a small farm. I'm going to have to do something else here. And he's the one in the local community that kind of encouraged others. Well, if I did this, you can do this too. Why not? And what does that look like? Today, he's got, despite all of the technology and everything that there is out there today, he has young farming men coming to him and asking him for advice and guidance. That gives them the advice and guidance that they need, but it also keeps him fired up because he's got something else that he can be involved in. And it's a very simple analogy, but anybody can be doing that in lots of different ways. There's a local professor that's reached out to me that is now retired and said, I'd like to find some ways that I can actually help and support in local business. We're not doing enough of this. We can get that engagement across the community by involving the community, but I caveat that the positive aspects of our community, because we don't need people that are just going to whinge and complain and moan and what have you, because sometimes it's so ingrained that it won't shift and it won't move. But we want the ones that want to participate, help and support, and look at what that might position itself as.
The only thing I was actually that an awful lot of companies are still work on the return on investment.
Yeah.
When it comes to social responsibility, it's very hard to put a metric on it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. That's fine, John.
Yeah. Can I jump in? Because literally John's comment is the perfect framing for what I was going to ask all along.
Well, there you go. Your timing was spot on then, Alan.
It's bang on. No, I think what it comes down to really is I'm looking at a lot of what you've said about conscious leadership, and I love it. I think it's exactly the right thing to be looking at. But I think there's the irresistible force in the immovable object, right? There's conscious leadership, and then it meets a thing kind of in economic speak called the Friedman doctrine, which is the primacy of the return on investment. So, I sometimes think when you get into these conversations, you can have conscious leadership, but to try and inject that into a corporation isn't maybe the right way to go, because like a corporation is designed to return profits to investors and to the markets if they're publicly quoted, and they're designed to do it really, really well. And it's like, a Formula One car is designed to go really fast around the circuit. It's not great if you want to pick up flat pack furniture from IKEA. It won't be the vehicle of choice. So, I sometimes think that maybe we need to look at the alternative models, the stakeholder ownership or the cooperative models or the different types of social enterprise. And I kind of rant on about this, and I look at social enterprises sometimes, and you see, a collective of bicycle repair people in Barcelona or something. It's like a hippie commune or something. It's not really a serious business proposition. It's not Microsoft or Intel or anything, and I wonder, how do those things scale? Because I'm more and more convinced that corporations in a corporate model with a mandate, an absolute legal fiduciary obligation to make profits as their number one thing, it's always going to be one step ahead in the priority list as to all of the other soft metrics that you can possibly have. So, how do we get the roots of social enterprise? And I know you've worked in the States extensively, where what I'm saying would be denounced roundly as communism, and I'd be tarred and feathered and walk off the reservation. But
yeah.
In Europe and in this part of the world, are there the roots of that sort of mentality starting to come up? And are we starting to look at alternative ways we could organize ourselves other than just in the traditional corporations?
I think they are, and I see it in lots of different spaces and places. When you put yourself on Facebook, you've got to realize that you're gonna see a lot of different things that's actually going on, and there is lots of networks in different places throughout the world that are actually already doing a lot of those things, and the metric is not around what the bottom line is, but how they can actually support and sustain humanity as a whole across the board. Again, if you look at one of the people I like to watch is the likes of Ben Vogel, and he does the New Lives in the Wild. And, one of the recent ones was a young couple didn't know each other particularly well, but they took on the ownership and responsibility of looking after a little island off the west coast of Ireland. I want to say it was at Glasgow or something like that, the island was called. And basically they were obviously being paid to go and live on this wild island and look after some sheep. It wasn't an easy thing to go on and off the island. They didn't know each other that well, but they suddenly realized, you know, and not having all the usual trimmings of you know, internet, what, you know, all the luxuries that we have here today, nothing else on the island, them and sheep, that was it. So they're communicating, and they both had come from London. He was an engineer, she was a nurse, and they took on the challenge. And, you know, one of the things that Ben Fogle said at the end of this was there is more and more people of that generation that are actually looking for that peace and that solitude and that opportunity or that community than actually going back. So I question how challenging it was for them to actually go back into London and go back into the normal life and frame. From their viewpoint, it was like, you know what, we need to make some money and go and buy our own island because this was beautiful. And they had so much more communication. Again, you know, if we think about technology, TV, Netflix, Amazon Prime, all those things, we've lost the art of communication. And things like this is perfect for bringing people back together to have good communication, fun, serious topics, the engagement. I guess the only thing that's missing right now is we don't have a glass of wine or whiskey or something of that ilk. But, you know, we've got that ability to be having those conversations and we're not doing it. But there's more and more groups under the current are doing it than what we think are doing it. Yeah. The big corporations can still, I still argue the point, you know, being in private equity, I argued this point tooth and nail, even in the sector. They've still got the ability to, and it doesn't matter that they can be the success drivers or the big money makers or whatever, they've still got the ability to be able to take some of that money and do something good with it. So we should be looking at business as being a force for good rather than a force for anything else. And when we switch that force for good, I think we're into a win-win. There's no reason we can't all be happier, more successful, enjoying whatever. We, you know, simpler is best. I think when we look at simpler, it's so much easier. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's a good sort of closing summary of that. Definitely seeing that with some of the younger generation, where it's not all about making money, big salaries now. It's about doing something that they enjoy doing with enough to get by, enough to live, okay, comfortably. But it's not all about the flash car and a big house and stuff anymore, which is actually very reassuring to see. So. Yeah. So thank you again, Shirley. That was fantastic. We broke our golden rule of not going past 2 o'clock, but it was for a good purpose.
My apologies.
So I was happy to go on. No, not at all. Not at all. And in terms of having a similar conversation, I know there's a few people have had to drop off, but we are doing our first proper get-together, physical get-together on the 27th of February. In Newry at the Clevey Castle. So we will be sharing information out about that soon. But it's to do more of this kind of stuff with a glass of wine or a glass of whiskey as well in the evening for those that can stay over. So certainly, Shirley, I will be letting you know when that's details about that when it comes. And Connor, John, also you'll be made aware of that. The others know about it. We're all organising it. So thank you so much, Shirley. Yeah, thanks very much indeed. And have a great weekend, everybody. And I shall speak to you soon. Shirley, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.